Hey guys, it's Nate from the Bike Company. Want to do a quick blurb video. I know you've seen a lot of our videos on bubble bleeds and installing brake pads, but I just want to go over why it's so important to remove the bleed port when you change your brake pads, because otherwise you can damage the bladder and you're not going to have any brakes and it's going to be a bummer. So basically your bleed port is right here on a Magura brake. It's similar on all the others. It's going to be towards the high point of the brake. And this opens the system up. Now your brake system is basically, this is going to be your master cylinder. And it's a piston that drives up and pushes fluid down through and drives your pistons on the back, on the caliper in. You've got a bladder system here that is used for when the brake fluid heats up. It allows some expansion. And it also gives the brake lever a consistent feel. So your bladder is essentially this real thin rubber gasket. And then on the Maguras, this is actually capped with another plastic cap. So it allows it to have a little bit of room to expand as the fluid heats up. Similar to all other hydraulic brake systems, with the caveat that the mountain bike brakes are fairly small, so everything is a little bit more dynamic to itself. And that's to say, there's a lot more change in the personality as your brake pads wear in a mountain bike brake than there would be on a motorcycle or a car. For me personally, I bubble bleed my brakes. We might say lever bleed might be a better term for some of the some people who see it a different way. But lever bleed or bubble bleed for a consistent brake feel, because as the brake pads wear and it requires more fluid deeper in the system, that bladder is going to essentially kind of vacuum in. And I believe that that's what changes the feel. I don't stay up at night worrying about it one way or the other, so to get a nice consistent feel, I top off the bladder. Now I'm not pressurizing the bladder. Same with when you originally bleed your brakes. You're just sort of keeping it at a static state, right? So even with the craft bottle you see there, I'm not pushing the fluid in so much as I'm pulling the air out. Now there's two ways that air can get in there, and I'm not going to get into which way is right or wrong. We've got a quick little animation to show you guys. There's one theory that the mineral oil or the brake fluid off gases creates bubbles and you're pulling the bubbles out. Or it could be that there's a slight vacuum on that bladder, and when you open it, it sucks in some air. Either way, there's going to be air bubbles. If you lever bleed your brakes, you will get a more consistent lever feel. That's why I do it. I'm not looking for extra things to do in my life, but that's why it's done. So we're going to look at what happens as we lever bleed this and we've increased the amount of fluid in it as there's more fluid in the pistons. Well, if I try to drive the pistons back in, I'm going to burst that bladder. It's going to mean no brakes. It's going to mean I just replaced my brake pads for brakes that don't work now. That's no good. Let's say you don't ever lever bleed or bubble bleed your brakes, and you say, well, okay, well, it had the same amount of fluid in there. It should be able to do this without damaging the bladder. Well, you still want to remove that port, because a lot of these modern brakes, one, the 4-piston brakes move a ton of fluid. Two, a lot of brakes don't fully sit in with their new pads. So in the illustration, we're going to show you, here's where the piston started. And if you drive that pad all the way into the caliper, well, you're actually pushing it past where it was, and you can stress and pop that bladder. So again, we're talking about something that's very, very small, very delicate, and you need to remove this port in order to take the stress off of it when you're changing brake pads, because you're driving the pistons back in. So you would open up your car or your motorcycle brakes when you do it the same thing. Make sure you do it on your mountain bike brakes or you're going to have some issues with it.